I was expecting actually, every time to applaud. So it's an honor really, and I feel very privileged that we are here. It's an honor and privilege also to present that the President of the whole institution is here to offer a warm welcome. You know what it means for the President the first day of the academic year. Yeah. So I think that needs an applause already.
Thank you. Welcome. It's Nikos maybe told you we are a bit unique. We start from pre-K graduate school, and we have various divisions, multiple high schools, middle schools. It's a unique institution. So let me just start my remarks. Distinguished speakers, honored guests, as President of Anatolia, it's my distinct honor to actually welcome you to the city and of course to our campus for the 16th Conference of Ecclesiological Investigations International Research Network, which takes an interdisciplinary approach for the 1700th anniversary of the Council of Nicaea. I would dare to say that this gathering in a way is historic, not only because of its theme and its location, but also being in a city where culture, faith and dialogue have flourished over centuries. And on another occasion that actually Nikos mentioned, when you saw your invitations, actually, I don't know how aware you were of our institution, Anatolia was established in 1886 in the US by missionaries. And the whole purpose was actually to provide not only education, but also support to Christian populations in the Ottoman Empire. So it has a long history, a turbulent history of being able to recover from major disasters, not only back in the Ottoman Empire, but also in Greece. During the Second World War, we were the headquarters of Wehrmacht for the whole Balkan region for 4 years. Many famous generals from Rommel to Waldheim actually were located on our campus in a temporary for a long period. So Anatolia is a very special institution, and just recently, as Nikos mentioned, our tertiary division, the American College of Thessaloniki, has been not only renamed but re-established as Anatolia American University, an institution that is fully recognized in the US for many years, but also now in all of Greece, Europe and elsewhere. So we are very proud of this. It's a major for us development. I should state that for us, this transformation from a college to a university is more than institutional. It embodies a renewed vision to broaden our horizons, to deepen our commitment to research and dialogue, and to embrace our role as a bridge between East and West, innovation, tradition, and also local depth and global reach. So as we welcome you to this city, I invite you to experience what AAU, our university, aspires to be. A place of openness, inclusivity and creativity, where multiculturalism is not only studied with rigor, but also lived in service to humanity and to the future of our common home. So I hope that this conference will not be just a conference of exchange of ideas, but a catalyst in developing relationships, new thinking. And so with these few words, I welcome you and I hope you will have a great exchange of ideas and views. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Very meaningful to us, and I think it fits very well with the theme of our conference, so thanks to him. Yeah, good morning everybody. I hope you had a good night's sleep and are doing well this morning. Welcome to our first plenary session. It is entitled The Council of Nicaea Okay, yeah, the minute is over, so I can welcome our speaker this morning, Reverend Dr. Susan Derber. Susan Derber is a minister of the United Reformed Church and the present World Council of Churches President for Europe. She has served local churches as principal of Westminster College in Cambridge and theology advisor at Christian Aid. From 2014 to 2022, she was moderator of the Faith and Order Commission of the World Council of Churches. Susan Derber has published books on preaching on the parables of Jesus, collections of prayers and articles and statements on ecumenism. She lives in the far west of Wales and enjoys writing, reflection and prayer, as well as walks along beautiful paths and wide beaches. And I think that just fits wonderful to our wonderful environment here. And thank you so much, Susan. We are very much looking forward to your paper.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your welcome, for welcoming me to this gathering, to this community. I'm very pleased to be here. And my first duty as one of the presidents of the World Council of Churches is to bring you greetings from our General Secretary, the Reverend Professor Jerry Pillay. We're very glad that many partners join us in this ecumenical journey. The World Council of Churches is a fellowship of 356 churches, Orthodox, Lutheran, Anglican, Methodist, Reformed, Pentecostal, and we work very closely in collaboration, in solidarity with the Roman Catholic Church. So I represent, as it were, millions of Christians who send you their hello. The primary purpose of the World Council of Churches is to call one another to visible unity in one faith, in one Eucharistic fellowship, expressed in worship and common life in Christ, through witness and service to the world, and to draw towards that unity in order that the world may believe. You might think that's a very ambitious goal, but note that the WCC asks the churches to call one another to visible unity, not just a kind of abstract unity, but something that can be seen, touched, felt. So the Council of Nicaea, an inspiration for those seeking unity today. And for me personally, preparing for this whole year of celebration and remembering of Nicaea has been an intense spiritual journey. The council was convened, as you know, so that the church could find its unity. Not only so that Constantine could find something to unify his empire. And the Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed is known by many as the symbol of our unity, which means perhaps that it is more of a horizon than a definition, as we heard in one of the sessions yesterday. In this anniversary year, many are celebrating this tangible sign of unity. But in our own time, there are more and more separated churches. And the ecumenical movement that seemed such a shining light of the 20th century seems to have faded. Even unity itself seems hard to celebrate in a world that values diversity and that sometimes fears what might be called unity. Yet Nicaea, I believe, can point us to a kind of unity that is at the heart of the Christian faith. A unity that is not about oppression or conformity or sameness, but something else. And it might, I think, revive our sense of the significance, the beauty, the vitality of true communion. When I was young, ecumenism was cutting edge and exciting in the place where I live. I was 12 years old when, in 1972, the United Reformed Church, my church in the United Kingdom, was formed from a union of Congregationists and Presbyterians. it was widely believed that this was just a first step in a growing movement for organic or institutional unity, and that further steps and larger unions would soon follow. Some thought, hoped, prayed that within a few years we would be joined with the Anglican Church, the Church of England, and with the Methodist Church in Britain, to have one united Church of England. Inspired by the unions among the mission churches in North and South India, and spurred by what felt like the tumbling of centuries-old barriers, hope surged strong. But this kind of ecumenism in the United Kingdom quickly foundered within really just a few years, as unity talks came to an end, and my little united church was left orphaned. We had hoped. Today, that kind of unity that I once hoped for seems a very distant hope indeed. And in my hometown, where I live now in Wales, I could take you to a street corner where there are 4 very large buildings of different Christian denominations, in each of which about 20 or so people worship each Sunday and are not actively considering finding a way to come together, except on very rare occasions. You need only walk a few paces between them, but they are a long way from finding a visible, tangible unity. The costs of keeping all those buildings going are scandalously high, and the experience of worshipping among a few people in a chapel or church built for 1,000 is dispiriting, but still it continues. I carry very close to my own heart the vision of the unity statement that came to the New Delhi World Council of Churches Assembly in 1961. I was only 1 year old at the time, so I don't remember it personally. But its words were drafted by Leslie Newbegin, a missionary from my own tradition, whose classes I went to 40 years ago in Oxford, and who became one of the first ecumenical bishops of the Church of South India. It says in one of the most beautiful and frankly lengthy sentences in Christian history, listen, "The unity which is both God's will and his gift to his church is being made visible as all in each place who are baptized into Jesus Christ and confess him as Lord and Saviour are brought by the Holy Spirit into one fully committed fellowship, holding the one apostolic faith, preaching the one gospel, breaking the one bread, joining in common prayer, and having a corporate life, reaching out in witness and service to all, and who at the same time are united with the whole Christian fellowship in all places and all ages, in such wise that ministry and members are accepted by all, and that all can act and speak together as occasion requires for the tasks to which God calls his people." Imagine that, all in each place, gathering together for the breaking of bread, sharing the one faith, recognizing each other's ministry and members. Think of the place where you live and imagine that. It's a beautiful vision, but it's not yet visible where I live, or I suspect where you live. The Orthodox participants at that assembly were keen to make sure that ecumenism needs not only to be about places, about communities today, but also about unity with the church throughout the ages. And I want to say yes to that too. But I don't always see that vision of unity being made vivid either. Unity has become a difficult word within today's churches for other reasons than our indolence. There is a fear among many in wider culture and society that unity is a cloak for the kind of oppression that seeks to impose the view of the dominance of the powerful, to exclude dissenters, the different, and those who do not conform. If unity means that we must all become the same, then those who know themselves to be different find themselves marginalised and fearful. If unity has the same grammar as uniformity, then it becomes imperial, oppressive, and unjust. This is not what I think Christian unity is or should ever be. But the church has been so affected by this fear of unity that it has resisted searching for it. I went to a recent meeting in England that had the title, One but Not the Same, Celebrating Diversity, Living with Difference. Oneness here, so qualified by all the other words, in order to express the desire to value difference and diversity above all. And within the World Council of Churches, we have for the past decades often used the word koinonia instead of the word unity, a word that seems more ambiguous, more flexible, more about relationship, fellowship, community, and solidarity. There are those in the churches who look at the Council of Nicaea and see it as an example of the kind of unity that is enforced by imperial power, that eliminates diversity, that turns some into heretics, that writes anathemas and sends people into exile. And they sometimes see the Nicene Creed that had its genesis at the Council as a tool for silencing minority voices. They might even have in mind that the Creed came to be part of the toolbox of the British Empire, as colonial subjects were forced to recite it. And in Wales, from whence I have come, there remains a strong memory of a time when saying the Creed in English, not in Welsh, at church or at school, was one symbol of Anglican/English dominance. So the story of Nicaea and the later reception of it thus sometimes plays to the tune of those who in our time are suspicious when people talk of unity. So it's not surprising perhaps then to find that among some in the churches today there is little real urgency about finding unity, echoing this general cultural caution about unity and union, even a union of nations. Celebration of diversity seems to many people today to be so much more liberating than a call to unity. And between some still separated churches I know, there are now wonderful covenant agreements or statements of ecumenical intention that have yet to be fulfilled in visible ways. The agreements lie on the shelf. There is a reticence to use the word unity and a fear of what it might bring. But such fear of unity, I think, says much more about our present-day qualms, but not so much about the realities of Nicaea or what the nature of Christian unity can be. So what is that kind of unity? It should be obvious from reading the New Testament that the Church has always celebrated diversity and difference. To read the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke and John is to see that the Christian narrative can take very different shapes and that witnesses to Jesus Christ come with extraordinarily diverse voices. And each of these different voices was celebrated and canonized by the Church not very long after Nicaea. This kind of diversity was not crushed or hidden. But there is also a strong thread through the varied stories of the Christian communities that we see in the epistles, calling for unity. And such unity is grounded in metaphors of the body, but above all in the oneness of Jesus with the Father and in the oneness of the disciples with Christ. John 17, the glory that you have given me, I have given them, so that they may be one as we are one. The unity at the heart of the gospel is not structural, is not about bureaucracy or organisation, not about sameness, but a union of love, a deep and eternal intimacy that is about giving and receiving, mutual dependence and mutual enrichment. It does not obliterate difference, but is actually based on difference, made of it, just as unions of love are made of our fascination with each other's difference. It's this kind of unity at the heart of God that those at Nicaea were tasked with putting into words. I know that Constantine may well have wanted to find a way through what he saw as fractious and irrelevant quarrels so that he could have a united religion for his united empire. But the bishops at Nicaea had a different imperative for unity, and they'd had it for a long time. A unity based on this foundational narrative of the faith they shared, about God who is one, a story of the union of divine and human in Christ, and the union of Christians with Christ and thus with each other. The opening statement of the Creed of Nicaea is about the oneness of God. We believe in one God. There are no other gods or demigods, no hierarchy of gods that might support a hierarchy of creation or even humanity, but one God who is the source of all that is. An absolute break from the Roman religious world. It also makes plain that all things have their source in this one God, and that all are holy, valuable, precious, and good. Creation may be diverse, but it's united in its source, in the one Creator. And the Creed talks about Jesus, who is about the heart of what Christianity is saying to the world. Jesus is begotten from the Father, of one being, with the Father, echoing the language of the Scriptures. Jesus is not created by God and therefore separate from God, but as one who is of the same being, completely at one with God, eternally. This expresses the absolute confidence that what we have seen in Jesus of Nazareth, who had compassion on the people, who touched the sick, and who welcomed those despised, this Jesus shows us what God is. Not only what God is like, but what God is, and is eternally. The complete and eternal unity of Father and Son is what Christianity proclaims. It's not that an eternal God raised up for a time an earthly human being, but that God is always what we see in Jesus. Love, compassion, self-giving, self-emptying. We come to know and understand the first person of the Trinity because of what we see and know of the second. And then Nicaea tells us that in Jesus, this one who is at the very being of God, God became incarnate and became human because of us and for us. It celebrates that God united with humankind for human beings, whatever our gender or indeed anything else about us, whoever we are. In Jesus, God becomes one with all flesh, with all. It turns out that this creed is all about unity, but union of the profoundest and most transforming kind. And now I want to let someone else unfold this to you, someone who badly wanted to go to Nicaea herself. And here I'm going to ask you to use your imagination. And trust me, that behind this lies some serious research. My name is Berenice. My bishop is preparing to travel to Nicaea, and I'm helping him pack. He has to travel light, of course, because part of the journey will be by boat. But in any case, he has not much to take with him. It's not long, actually, since he was released from the galleys. and sometimes I have to bathe the marks of the whip on his back. So I know he won't relish this journey. He is, you should know, a wonderful and gracious man, and I have such love for him. But, you know, I'm not so confident that he's so good at theology. I wish I could be there to help him in the debates. You see, I learned about theology from the time when I was enslaved, having been taught the lowly tasks of reading and writing so that I could scribe for my master. I copied the letters of Paul and some of the Gospels, and having copied them so many times, I learned their voices well enough to recite them myself. My master and I would sometimes talk about them, and I was so thrilled by what I discovered there. I have suffered so much from the way things are in this world. A world of hierarchy of masters and slaves, men and women, citizens and subjects. So imagine a kingdom in which servants become friends, where there is one body of people, and where God and human beings are so close to one another and not afraid of one another anymore, but united. I remember the day when I came to understand that our faith is about bringing together what has been broken. A day when even I, with my broken and abused body, began to feel whole again. But I have to wait here, in Thessaloniki, and pray that it all goes well at Mass here. My bishop will be gone for weeks, and I hope he will cope with the journey. We've talked about the things that will be on the agenda, and I hope he will speak up if he needs to. I'm not sure he always understands how important some things are, or exactly what's at stake. You see, I'm afraid to tell you, I'm ashamed to tell you, that in this small city, in this backwater of our empire, we have problems. You will be shocked to know that there are people here who, having disagreed with our bishop about some things, set up their own congregation with a different leader who even claims to be the true bishop instead of mine. I know you'll be shocked. The issues themselves? Well, things like what position we should adopt for prayer, whether priests can lend money at interest, or what to do about those who sacrificed to Roman gods during the persecution. I know people have different views about these things, but why would you want to set up a new church because of them? Whatever we disagree about, there is nothing that could possibly be solved by having two Christian churches in one town, as though a church is like a preferred cloth dyer or baker, or like choosing a hairdresser or a theatre. It's a contradiction in terms to have more than one Christian gathering in one place. I really hope it won't be repeated anywhere else in the empire. I heard one preacher say, it was because of our disunity that God was punishing us in the persecution. And I don't believe God will be so cruel, but I do see that being separated from one another is unfaithfulness. So any creed that comes out of Nicaea, and I pray they can agree one, must say we believe in one God. We're not like the Romans or the Greeks. We don't have any number of temples dedicated to different gods. We have one temple because we believe in one God. And the God we believe in is one, has integrity and consistency. And I know that some people think we have two gods, that Jesus is a kind of second God, so we could have one church dedicated to the Father and one to the Son, but Jesus is and always has been at one with God. He shows us what God from the beginning has always been, and will always truly be, a God who gives life and who reaches out to bring life. The quality of this intense, loving and giving union of mutuality, of reciprocity, of giving and receiving, this union is what characterizes the God we believe in. That's that's the kind of unity we are called to. And this means that we should live in a way that mirrors that. So how could we possibly have two gatherings, two churches in the same place? I'm sorry to say that our bishop doesn't always get this. He really isn't sure that it matters that much. And in some ways, I think he's happier with a smaller congregation and one where people agree with him. From what we know of the other congregation, life united would be more turbulent. Our bishop sees their so-called bishop once in a while for a glass of wine and they share news of church life. But for me, I won't rest until our two congregations have found a common life, showing the oneness of God and the communion of Christ with the Father. Anything less is frankly anathema to me. I must be going. I've lots of packing to do. My own experience, this is me now, my own experience of studying Nicaea has opened up for me a space in which unity is much, much more than ecclesiastical politics, or even an ecumenical movement. It is the heart of the gospel and the heart of what we have come to know about God. It is actually, as those at Nicaea, I think, understood profoundly, the very core story of our faith. It's the unity, the integrity at the heart of God that is the starting point for how we live in the church and in the world. It's not that we have to agree on everything, but it's important to get that central narrative of the faith right. Otherwise, we lose what it is that Christians have to bring to the world. The story of Nicaea shows a remarkable commitment to finding words to speak together of that heart of the gospel. And I'm so impressed that they did it in so few words. Faith and order never manages anything. The Nicene Creed of 325 and 381 is like a poem telling the story that is the beginning of all our stories in the church today. And I think, well, I admire those who spend weeks travelling on rickety carts, who braved appearing before an emperor so soon after a terrible time of persecution, who spent weeks searching for the best words they could find that would encapsulate unity for the church. Rowan Williams has written of the theological debates of the early centuries. The Christianity that emerged as the predominant voice was consistently anxious to put Humpty Dumpty together again. They wanted to re-establish a vision of the universe and its history that made one story, one system. Hence their strenuous opposition to any scheme that divided God the Creator from God the Redeemer, and increasingly their opposition to theologies that divided the human and the divine in Jesus. What is amazing is that those at Nicaea could say what needed to be said in a way to secure this faith that does not divide in so few words. People ask why. Yesterday some of us heard people say, why does the Creed not say more about Jesus' teaching, his life and ministry, his passion and death? It seems that those at Nicaea were content to have different accounts of all those things, to accept the diversity and difference of four Gospels at least. But they were committed to agreeing those few things on which the significance of our faith depends. With them, we are free to express the diverse diversity of culture and expression among us. This is not an oppressive, imperial kind of unity, but more like an invitation into the life that God wills for us, as those in communion with one another. The Roman Catholic Martin Koshansky, in his book The Creed in Slow Motion, reminds us of a particular and vital task that a creed might have. And it's not to say everything. He writes, a creed tells us who we are. It reminds us of truth we have forgotten or would like to forget. It steers us away from mistakes people have made in the past, which is a good thing because we are people too, and quite likely to be making the same mistakes. The mistakes may be attractive, but they are not true. And in the end, truth is everything. Sometimes today there is a fear of saying anything that might seem to deny anyone else's voice. And I know that fear. There is fear that minority voices will be persecuted. And those at Nicaea knew what such exclusion could be, because they and the people they loved and admired had suffered it themselves. And perhaps that is why they did nothing more violent than publish anathemas, while the lions and the gladiators lay quiet. But to be clear about the central story of a Christian faith is not in itself to oppress or exclude, for its proclamation is good news for everyone and for all creation. So, in 2022, the small church to which I belong celebrated our 50th anniversary. And at a service to mark that, a former General Secretary, David Cornick, said, "Unity isn't an exercise in ecclesiastical joinery. It is growing into Christ, becoming the people that Christ wants us to be." It's not an exercise in ecclesiastical joinery. In a time when church unions are no longer being negotiated, how can Nicaea help us grow into deeper union? We could receive 3 things from Nicaea. Firstly, a reminder of the scandal of disunity and a sense of urgency about finding unity. The kind of urgency that would inspire people 1700 years ago to travel over land on primitive carts and to go on meeting together for 10 weeks or so until they could find words they could say together. Secondly, a fierce sense of the essential heart of the gospel, the message that the world, so divided, so violent, needs to hear. We are called to love one another, even our enemies, and to find that deep communion between people that leads to peace. And thirdly, it can inspire us to find the courage to live in union with Christ, who died as a subject of empire, at the hands of the empire, and in whom God was fully joined with all of us. Then I think we could look at our divided churches and see how absurd and unfaithful we are being. For we believe in one God and in Jesus Christ, of one being with the Father, who because of us human beings and for our salvation came down and became incarnate, God completely at one with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan, for your excellent, your very, very rich presentation. Thank you so much. We are now continuing our conversation on the Council of Nicaea and its inspirations for those seeking unity today with a response. The response will be given by Dr. Reverend Sotiris Bukis. I will first introduce him and then I will welcome you here. Reverend Dr. Sotiris Bukis is the senior pastor of the Greek Evangelical Church in Thessaloniki. He serves at the WCC Commission on Faith and Order as co-chair of the Ecclesiology Study Group and as a member of the steering committee of the upcoming 6th World Conference on Faith and Order, which will take place soon in Egypt this October on the occasion of the 1700th anniversary of the Council of Nicaea. Reverend Dr. Sotiris Koukis teaches systematic and ecumenical theology at the Crete Bible College. He has been involved in research on Orthodox evangelical relations and on global Christianity. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Dr. Sotiris Koukis.
Let me begin by expressing my gratitude both for the invitation but also for the joy and privilege to respond to an outstanding theologian and prominent ecumenist and dear friend, Susan Derber, with whom we shared a very rich decade at the Faith and Order Commission. Responding to Susan's paper and reflecting on Nicaea as inspiration for contemporary unity, I would like to highlight three main points. First, Nicaea as inspiration for taking a well-needed position. Many of the realities that Susan describes in the UK are similar to those of many Protestant churches in Greece. Just as Susan took us in her hometown, I could also take you in my hometown, which is actually here, where at the city center you will find 5 Protestant churches with about 20 or so people each Sunday who also are not actively considering finding a way to come together except on rare occasions. Here also you need to walk only a few paces between them. The main difference with the UK is that the church buildings here are smaller. And while there have been some attempts for approach, including some very fruitful ones, in many other cases, many small churches prefer to slowly die alone rather than live together. As was stated in the 4th Lausanne Congress last year, the 4 most dangerous words in the global church today are, "I don't need you." For larger churches like the one where I serve, the challenge is not that we are too few, it is that we are too many and diverse already. If we add even more diversity, this brings the risk for more division, not less. After all, we all see the polarization in society, and there is the fear that if we open discussions on some hard topics, the same polarization will come among us. Thus, we end up with the illusion that peace comes through silence. But the reality is that people are looking for answers, and if they do not hear them from their church, others will fill the gap. And these will often include problematic or even extreme voices who will catechize our flock, eventually leading to more confusion or even division. The Council of Nicaea faced a similar danger and convened to take a position. And for this, we are grateful. Now, indeed, it was the imperial call that made the Church articulate its faith at Nicaea, and this was one of the relatively few cases in church history where political intervention eventually resulted in a positive outcome. This is not to romanticize what happened, or to say that this is the way things should always be. Far from it. Nevertheless, it is a reminder that even under such circumstances, God's grace can still be at work. Interestingly, Nicaea is one of these cases where people outside the church could understand the urgency faster than the church itself, and relied on the church to play a role in the unity not only of Christians, but also of humankind and society. If we are honest, we will all have to confess that churches often tend to be slow in their reactions and act much later than they should, or even when it is too late. With all the division and polarization around us, the church has to decide if it will just observe it passively, in silence, or whether it will actively take a stand in a way that can contribute to the unity of both the Christians and of humankind. The world is desperate for good examples of communities of unity and peace. Instead of waiting for the next danger or the next emergency to unite us, how would it be if it was our common sense of urgency and mission that would accelerate our seeking of unity? Second point, Nicaea and synodality. One thought-provoking part of Susan's paper was the imaginary voice of Berenice, sharing her concern that our bishop doesn't always get it. It is indeed sad that a woman like Berenice could not attend Nicaea, and that the participation of all believers in decision-making in many churches still remains something that is far from being realized. Yet at the same time, I believe Nicaea does have something precious to teach us on synodality. If an ecumenical council was held today, it would be tempting for most churches to only send their top leadership. How many churches would send a deacon as a delegate? And yet it was a deacon, Athanasius, that played a pivotal role in the council. Under this viewpoint, Nicaea stands as a perpetual reminder of how inclusion and synodality can change the church and the world. May we see a continuous broadening of the table in all churches to allow for more voices to be heard. Of course, this does not mean that the inclusion of more voices would solve everything. We are fully aware of the complexities it also brings. For example, in order to intrigue our imagination a little more, let me introduce you to two other imaginary voices from the Church of Berenice, but I haven't brought a scarf, so bear with me. The first would be Beatrice. Beatrice would say, why do they have all these theological discussions at Nicaea? Doctrine divides, let's just love each other. And then there would be Eunice. And Eunice would say, unity is sentimentality. We do not need people who disagree with our theology. In fact, we need to get stricter and draw more red lines in a dangerous world like ours. Now, every bishop has a Berenice, a Beatrice, and a Eunice in the congregation. If Beatrice was bishop, she would unite with everyone unconditionally. If Eunice was bishop, she would excommunicate half of her own congregation. But I am so grateful for voices like that of Berenice, who understand both the importance of theology and the imperativeness of love. The Church needs more Berenices and needs to find ways to include their voice in processes of synodality. The danger for all of us, who are also church leaders, is to listen to the concerns of Berenice and think, you don't understand. You don't understand how many balances we need to keep. Yet at the same time, the points of the Berenices of the world need to be seriously considered, challenging as they might be. In one of this year's meeting of the Faith and Order Commission, as we were planning the upcoming World Conference next month in Egypt, we asked the following question: if our parishioners were at the conference, what would they hope to be discussed? The answer to this question is something that must inform our work, at least to some extent. Otherwise, the Berenices of our churches will still be pondering that we don't always get it. And the third point, the Creed as inspiration for unity in love. There is a third point where Nicaea is a source of inspiration, and that is, of course, the Creed. In its original Greek version, the Creed of Nicaea is just 134 words, short enough to be shareable on social media as the perfect size of a Facebook page or a 1-minute YouTube reel, profoundly deep, theologically dense, and yet accessible to everyone and easy to memorize. As Susan underlines, the Creed is a foundation of unity. In fact, unity is impossible without a creed. To take a position on a certain topic, especially if this is done through synodal process, is not oppression. Sometimes it is the lack of taking a position that opens the door to confusion and division. Thus, if too much agreement has the danger of oppression, too little agreement has the danger of division and chaos. Thus, articulating a position on the essentials is vital. Unity is impossible without a creed. Yet, at the same time, unity is impossible if based only on a creed. In Greece, both the Evangelical Church of Greece and the Roman Catholic Church recite the Nicene Creed without the Filioque. Yet this does not automatically bring unity with the Orthodox Church. It is an important starting point, but certainly not the only point. Most importantly, as Susan observes, the Nicene Creed is all about unity both by its statements, but also by its silences. It focuses on what is foundational, but does not try to elevate everything to foundational status. And even the anathemas at the end are interesting, not just because the lions lay quiet, but also because the anathemas are reserved only for those holding heretical views, not just different views. Too often people do not make the distinction between heresy and heterodoxy. And even more so in the era of social media, where digital anathemas are easily being exchanged, not because of heresy, but because of difference. Christians can and must be an example to society, as a community where diverse views can coexist within, of course, commonly accepted limits. And here is exactly the heart of the challenge. As the responses to the Church towards a common vision have revealed, I'm quoting, the question of how much and which diversity is to be celebrated, and what diversity is by contrast unhealthy division and should be overcome, is evident in connection with a whole range of issues, not just ecclesiological, but also and overwhelmingly moral. Interestingly, many of the responses feel more like cries for help in the midst of pain than a realistic sense that ecumenical discussion might in itself reveal a solution, end quote. So how could the churches then address the challenge of diversity? Well, how do we address diversity in other parts of life? Think of your family. I can certainly think of my family and how diverse it is. If you find our Greek extended family with about 20 people around the same table, you will be surprised by how these people sit together. If we started from our differences, we would never have a meal together. And yet it's the family ties that are the starting point, not our differences. So we can be together without our diversity being fully resolved. In fact, even in married couples, I was reading recently the findings of the Gottman Institute on their research on marital conflicts and happiness in marriage. Here is their key finding. Are you ready? 69% of all marital conflicts are not resolvable. That is, of all the things that you disagree with your spouse, on the 69 of them, you will never agree. Now, isn't this the most hopeful contribution of this conference so far? And yet, this is indeed good and hopeful news, because it means that it is even scientifically documented that we do not need to agree on everything in order to be together and love each other. And that unity is not the result of complete agreement or uniformity. Unity flows from the conscious decision that our love will be greater than our diversity. And great as our differences may be, we still choose to pursue the relationship. Especially if, as churches, we now agree on so much more than we disagree, and our disagreements are certainly below 69%. This is the attitude that the unity statement of the Karlsruhe Assembly described as an ecumenism of the heart. It is the kind of Christ-like love that moves us to walk honestly and wholeheartedly beside one another, to try to see the world through the eyes of others, and to have compassion for one another, to build the trust that is such a vital part of our ecumenical journey. May this be our compass throughout the journey. Thank you.
The minute? Yeah, the minute is over. Thank you very much, Sotiris, for your excellent response. Thank you. I would now like to give Susan the possibility to briefly respond to Sotiris' paper, and then like we could have maybe a short conversation between the two of you, and then we open the discussion for questions, answers, comments from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Sotiris, for that wonderful, wonderful response. And it shows, I think, the fruit of the way that we've worked together on Faith and Order. And I think we have come to know and understand each other. So thank you. I could make a few comments, but I noted your first point about how people, the most dangerous phrase, I don't need you. And also that thing about people fear polarization, so they don't speak. And I think I see that. And I think there are some communities that have that fear more than others. And others that are only too ready to speak. They don't fear, perhaps they're more like unis. I think that's right, that people think then that unity comes from silence. And I think that's not the healthy kind of communion that God is bringing us, which must be based on honesty. To use your parallel of a marriage, if a marriage is based on one partner keeping silent, we think of that as an abusive relationship, wouldn't we? Because they're afraid. So yes, we can't be based on silence. We need perhaps places where we can feel more safe to speak our mind, and spaces where we then go into a bigger community. And I think I've come to recognise that perhaps one form of Christian life that I would value is a small group where I can speak, share a meal, pray with others every week, but then also have experiences of the wider, broader church, perhaps not as often as that, but regularly. So perhaps we all need multiple spaces in which we can be brave, in which we can also dare to find unity. You spoke about mission, and one of the things I think I wanted to say about Nicaea, and I've said in other places, is that I see there those who were trying to find words to make the gospel, to commend the gospel in a Greco-Roman culture, to find words that would make the gospel resonate in their own times. And I hear that echo so much in our own time, that the need to find words to speak something of the mystery of God. And I know we can't know God absolutely, but something that will resonate in our times. I feel that echo very much with Nicaea, and the need to do that together. And I loved your inventions of other women in the little church, and the one who thought that, well, let's just assume we're united and not speak about anything that might divide. That's why I really like what the World Council of Churches has always said, that unity must be not kind of platonic and abstract. It must actually be incarnate, visible, tangible, as God became incarnate. So we can't get away with that, though I can understand the fear that lies behind it. And Eunice, yes, I can understand that temptation to be stricter, draw the boundaries, and that's an easier option, but one we must resist. And the bit about the creed being an inspiration, you're so right. So it's so short, it could go on a Facebook page. It's so accessible. It's not quite a tweet, is it? But it's a Facebook post. And I have come to appreciate the creed, the Nicene Creed in particular, as a poem, or as something that can be sung as a hymn, something that is beautiful, light from light, God from God. There is a beauty about it. It's not just a tick list. It expresses something very beautiful about the nature of God and who Jesus is. And in my churches, people very rarely say the Nicene Creed, but we sing it at Christmas, in our Christmas carols, and it is beautiful. And I remember I heard from one minister, I think a Lutheran minister, who said he rediscovered the creed when he stopped seeing it as something he had to tick so that he could be ordained, as a kind of legal test. But when he saw it as part of doxology, as part of the worship of the church, then suddenly it opened up to him in a new way. And I really can appreciate that. And I think one last thing, the turning point for me in thinking about the creed came from the first meeting of our commission in Romania, when we went to the Orthodox church on a Sunday. And the church was packed with all sorts of people bringing babies to the front to be blessed, all of that. The people didn't have much to say in the liturgy, but there was one point where they all said the creed together. And they said it as though they meant it. Yeah, they really meant it. And it was as though they were about to go on this exciting journey. And they were speaking with one voice before they were going out together. And I thought, I didn't know a creed could be like that. So I've learned a lot through this year. Thank you, Sotiris.
Thank you, Susan. Would you briefly like to comment, or?
I can make one brief comment on the silence. One of the greatest dangers when we remain silent is that people try to categorize us in the categories that they already have. And on many topics, people just have two categories. So, for example, there are conservative views and liberal views, or however one calls them, and they perceive that the church is either the one or the other, and usually this comes with a package ideology. But the church does not fit in either part of the spectrum. Actually, the church is a third way that challenges both of them. It may have some common ground with both of them, but it also challenges both of them. And when the church suggests and shows the third way, then people realize that they don't have to choose between whichever two options they thought they had. So our silence is not just about teaching people inside the church about our position, but also showing a third way, a beautiful way, and something that makes even other people think that we don't have to choose just between what we've been told that our only options are.
Thank you to the both of you. Thank you. Now, wonderful. I think I will pass you on the microphone, and then I would like to ask you to really stand up and briefly say your name, where you're from.
Thank you both. My name is Joanne Terrell. I am a professor at Chicago Theological Seminary. And I noticed that both of you mentioned the imperative of love as the substantive weakness of the church in the world. And I totally agree with that. But how do you love the crucified world? I mean, how do you actually express that in a unity as the church, the voice of God, the voice of Jesus? The crucified world, the world, say at the southern borders of Europe, that's excluded because of profound racism of the zeitgeist, the profound racism of this zeitgeist. And how do you love the crucified world that is completely suffering in Palestine? The crucified world. And how do you bear that kind of witness as the church, as the unified church, and not just having agendas, different agendas, because you're, and being content to settle for having different agendas, but because you're incredibly committed to the work of Jesus Christ.
Thank you. That's a really powerful question and important one. One of the things we've said at the World Council of Churches in a statement which talked about love is that we quoted Cornel West, that justice is what love looks like in public. So love is not,
No, it's not sentimental.
it's not sentimental. It's about justice. Yes.
Well, how do you bear witness to that in the world as the unified church?
Well, I think by speaking out, and by living, speaking out together, I think that's, when we can do that together, we have a more powerful voice. And also by acting together, by living the faith.
Well, if I may give a practical example of loving crucified people, I can tell you about the refugee crisis here in Greece. There are always refugee inflows here in Greece. There is not a time that there are not, but 10 years ago there was really a skyrocketing number of refugees coming in Greece, and there were the often expected reactions to refugees, the right wing and the left wing. Our churches try to show that third way in a different way, starting first not by a political agenda, but by the fact that we saw Jesus as a refugee, but also because many of our ancestors were refugees in the Greek-Turkish War that happened 100 years ago. Many of the families of our congregations were descendants of refugees themselves. So when we saw refugees coming, it was not just foreigners coming, it was people who could be us. So it's about to see yourself in the other, and it's also to see Christ in the other, and also to be Christ to the other. And when these are combined, now you will not find analogies in every single example of crucified people in the world, but if this is the basis from which one starts, and not from the political views that someone has on this or that issue, then if the love of Christ is what begins, then that's where a united church can do. And actually, only a united church can address such issues. Some problems are so big that only a united church can do it. So it's what they say, that the apartheid was such a major challenge that a divided church could not address it.
I think, could I just add briefly that one of the things that's so impressive about Nicaea is that many of those who came were themselves from the crucified people. They were those who bore the marks of persecution, and they came from parts of the empire where many had suffered deeply. So I think once I thought they were, white men who worked in libraries. That's not the truth.
They weren't that.
No, they weren't. They were from North Africa, the Middle East, from Persia. There were people from there were people who had suffered. So they knew that the gospel that they were telling was for the crucified ones, as much as it was about the crucified.
I am Eleni Kasevouri. I'm a member of CHEMES and I teach at the International Hellenic University. So it's a pleasure for me to be here, and thank you so much for your inspiring papers, both of you, especially for your sense of humor, which I think it's a very great base for a honest dialogue. I would like to ask both of you a question regarding unity and hermeneutics, because sometimes hermeneutics become either a kind of division, or they lead to division, or they lead to unity. So, do you see hermeneutics and different hermeneutics among Christians as a challenge or as an opportunity?
Well, unavoidably it's both, because you need to interpret in order to take a position. So, and many times the first step that we have when different voices come around the table, the first thing you need to understand is how do we begin different? What are our different methodologies? What are our different hermeneutics? In the Faith and Order Commission, the moral discernment of the last years, focused to identify the different hermeneutics and methodologies behind the different moral views, because it is soon, whenever you start a discussion with someone, you soon realize that we start from different starting points, different hermeneutics, different methodologies, and if you do not identify where this comes from, then it will always be two people talking parallelly or at each other without really communicating. So difficult as hermeneutics is, it's impossible to have dialogue and unity without them.
There are so many layers at which one could answer that question, because Nicaea itself was about interpreting scripture, and I realised that it was very much about scripture, not about abstract Greek philosophy. But there's also the question of how people interpret Nicaea itself. How do you read it? And of course it bears with it the history of its own interpretation. So yes, hermeneutics are always part of the process. But maybe you have something specific in mind. No?
Thank you. I'm Joy McDougall, and I'm from the Canada School of Theology at Emory University. Both beautiful papers. Thank you very much. And I appreciated the humanism of the heart, and also the call to be more like a family. And we don't really know each other very well through all those church walls that we built. I have two questions, and they go in two different directions. One is about you mentioned the ways in which the church walls divide us, even in the smallest of towns or in Thessaloniki. But we also talked about the putting the creed on social media. Our world is polarized by the siloed thinking that's going on in social media in a new way that is exponentially far worse, I think, than even just walls, because we don't have shared conversations about what the truth is. So I don't have an answer to this question, but I'm wondering what you're thinking about those siloed truth chambers that we're in. And the other question is a completely different one, and that is about catechesis. I teach Intro to Systematics. Most of my students have not recited the Nicene Creed. And so I think this is a really interesting question about and I have Protestants and I have Catholic students. I don't have very many Orthodox students, but we're uncatechized across the world in different ways. So I'm just curious, to get my students to think about the Nicaea, a bunch of ahistorical Americans, is very difficult, and I suspect it's not just my problem. So two different questions, and I'd be glad if either of you answer them.
Well, let me address the siloed divisions that you mentioned, which are, as we all know, very serious. They're becoming much more serious in the place where I live, as well as in many others. And I think my answer is to draw on my training in mediation and counselling, and in my Christian faith in the possibility of unity. And to say, if there's a conflict, walk towards it. Talk to those people who are different from you. Don't rest in your silo. And I do see the danger of, just picking up your news from Facebook where your friends reply and they will think the same as you and all that. But to go out and find people who think very differently is really interesting. I actually support a political party in the UK, but when I go around knocking on doors, I think it's really useful to meet those who are deeply opposed and to hear their voices and their emotions. And I think we need people who are willing to cross those barriers and get out of the silos.
The silent thinking is both in the online and in the offline world, and especially in the online world, the algorithms are doing everything they can to keep creating more and more silos. So I sometimes tell to people in my church, you need to hack the algorithm, not by actually doing a hacking thing, but the way I am doing it is I follow different voices that I think very different about than me. And that always keeps me in perspective. And coming now to the offline world, the church can and should be a place where silos are naturally dissolved, and we actually engage and encounter people who are different than us. And it's a unique opportunity not just to listen to others, but to live together. And when other people see this, they see the difference, and they want to see it, because the toxic dialogue that exists in the society is something that bears pain to everyone who sees it. And society desperately needs to see paradigms of people being together and not shouting at each other. Then concerning the catechesis, I'm very interested in this question because I'm actually this period start teaching a catechesis class in our church, and what I am currently doing is I teach on these things, not even to theologians. These are lay people who want a discipleship course, as we call it. And when it comes to the Christological discussions, the lesson is not just about what it means for philosophy or what it means for salvation, but how the incarnation informs what it means to be human. If we connect it in this way, so for example, Jesus was fully human and fully God, and yet he needed to rest. So you do not exist to be productive continuously and work without rest. If Jesus rested, you need to rest. If Jesus understood his limitations, or he always was in fellowship with other believers, then how much this affects how we think the incarnation informs how we live practical Christian life. So I believe these doctrines are practical. It's up to us not to make them boring or philosophical, but to explain the practical dimension they have.
Yeah, I connect. I just say that certainly in my context, I spend a lot of time talking to Christians who maybe have never heard of the Council of Nicaea or the Nicene Creed. Many of the newer churches, Pentecostal churches, all sorts of churches in Britain, and I do it by monologues, dialogues, giving them a sense that these were real people with the kinds of concerns that we share, and we're trying to find a voice to speak about the Christian faith in an alien culture, and that's something that they can really resonate with.
So I do have 4 more people on my list, but we only have 5 minutes left. So my suggestion is that you, Aaron, you could bring the mic to them, just one after another, and then you can respond together.
Raise your hand. To raise your hands if she's pointing. So one. You said you had 4. Okay. We'll come down again and come back.
Agnes Brazil from the Philippines. The Australian Anglican theologian Bruce Kay argues that rather than unity, it's better to start with Catholicity, because unity is often associated with uniformity. And Catholicity has 2 dimensions. It's our unity in the belief in Christ, but at the same time, the particular embodiment of Christianity in particular time and place. So there's recognition of the differences. And he also spoke of dynamic Catholicity, where from the ground up, you enrich one another as well as critique. I don't know, how would you view this argument?
Yes, I'm Marina Behera from OCMS in the UK. I just wanted to react to the previous comment and question about the love of Christ that was given as a response to the crucified Christ. And it reminded me of the blessings. May the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all. So I wanted to sort of like I was starting to reflect, is it the love of God? And then the response was that, the love of Christ, and the response was that it's not sentimental love. But what I wanted to say is love is not that cheap. So I want to start with the love of God that led to the crucified Christ, because God is a God of justice. And so I just wanted to make that connection. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael Biel from Hamburg, Germany. I appreciate the discussion about how coming to a solution and coming closer to each other. I just want to highlight and ask, there were a few sentences about Nicaea as also settling debates in the sense of excluding people. So what is after the fact, and how do we deal then with these differences where we agree that we can't agree? And I think that is one of the difficult questions that we have today in our truth bubbles. We don't talk to each other, but we have agreed we don't agree. So, but still in a society we need friends to live together. So I think maybe one word about Nicaea as a decisive and deciding point in history.
Hi, I'm Jenny Delgado from the University of Lausanne, Peruvian, and also thinking about this unity. How can be the line between unity and colonization? Because for the native perspective of so many different communities in Abjayala, people know as America, Latin America, North America, how this can be an issue, reading or effective for the creed and the unity idea. Many years later, colonization arrived to the continent. Even Jesus knew about it. There's a whole new world for all the Europeans, and then don't recognize native spiritualities as a something, even as a religion, right? Even today, from yesterday and today, I don't hear nothing about native spiritualities. And we are in conversation with different religions and around the world, but how we can also include all these practices who are alive, and people are Christians too. How this both identity can be in one, this unity idea or proposal of the church.
Pearson Shaw from Hickory, North Carolina in the United States. One, sort of in response, Joy, I think we're sitting in the same area, so we're sort of permeating the same idea. Individualism. In postmodernism, we live in a very individualistic culture, and I can't help but thinking how absolutely countercultural, at least in the correct translation out of the Greek, first person plural, not like the Apostles' Creed, first person singular, that it cuts across. It's not I, it's we. But the other matter becomes still problematic, and that is that postmodernism, it seems to me, has left us with the idea that we can confess something, but we don't have to believe it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Let me go back to the question of hermeneutics for a moment, because I think there is a way of reading Nicaea and the Creed of Nicaea, perhaps the early one and the later one, through the lens of empire, which I choose to read. And this is one which I think, I hope, pray, gives space for indigenous spirituality, for the voices of those who are still today subjects of empires. And empires, as we know today, take subtle forms. So I think one of the things I value so much about the Nicene faith, is that it says that one who was subject to empire, one who was crucified under Pontius Pilate, and the inclusion of Pontius Pilate as the responsible one in the Creed is absolutely vital, because it says this was someone who was crucified by the empire. This is someone who who took the part of an enslaved person and washed feet. And this person is the one who is of the very being of God. And at the beginning of the Creed, we say we believe in one God, Father, in the English translation I learned, Almighty. But I've heard a suggestion that Pantocrator can mean the one who holds everything. And I said to the person who told me this, you mean like a baby? Yes. So this is a father who is like a mother, who holds everything in God's hands. It's not an almighty father ruling like an emperor. So I have discovered a reading of the Creed and of Nicaea, which I think is profoundly anti-imperial and which challenges all of our attempts to say that there is more than one God, to make someone else an idol. And I think, in a way, that makes Nicaea something that is open, that is not imperial theology. It doesn't have to be read that way. It can be read in a way which is profoundly subversive. And Catholicity, let me just say a word about that. I think Catholicity I see as a wonderful, wonderful mark of the Church, which has to be held together with unity, holiness, and apostolicity. And if you hold those things together, then I think none of us, of course, ever succeed in doing that. But what a great vision. I imagine I want to be part of a church that is diverse, Catholic in that sense, that reaches back through time, through the ages, that has a sense of the traditions, and yet is at its heart profoundly in love with each other, in union in that sense. I think Pastor Satira said.
Some quick responses from me as well. On Catholicity, first of all, I agree with Susan. I would add that Catholicity is easily misunderstood. I can't tell you how many denominations don't have the creed, the Nicene Creed, because it says we believe in the Catholic Church, and they think it's the Roman Catholic Church. So I think it's much easier to have unity as the starting point. Then, yes, there are people who think that you can confess but not believe, so treat the creed like I have read and agreed to the terms and conditions. But at the same time, the fact that the creed exists both in we believe and in I believe is a good combination, because the I believe came as a baptismal formula. So whoever gets baptized, yes, he or she gets connected to the we, but it's also personal. So it's I believe, I actually believe, not just confess but not believe. So I think when we keep the I and the we together and we don't lose sight of either of these, that helps have a holistic approach. Concerning colonization and the baggage that the creed has, yes, this is a danger. In many cases, people reject not the creed itself or its content, but the baggage they consider that it, or it actually carries. And in these cases, we just don't start by the creed itself. It's time for mutual confession and explore history together and confess to each other when we have sinned at each other. It's only then that discussion about the creed itself or whichever other theological question can begin. And then, yes, there are cases where we agree that we can't agree. And when these, and yes, there are red lines. It's not that there are no red lines, or what Beatrice would say, let's just love everyone. Yes, there are red lines. Nicaea drew some of them, and that was something that was both necessary and still is necessary to draw some red lines. The hope is that they will be on issues that are really what may distinguish, what makes someone a Christian or not Christian, and not if it is what makes someone of my denomination or not my denomination. And for love and justice, as this is often a pushback that we receive, I think one of the most genius responses to that was what was written in the unity statement. And I know that Susan wrote this phrase herself, that when it was talking about an ecumenism of the heart, it was that love in private, it's tenderness, but in public, it's justice. So it's not an either or.
Thank you very much again to our two speakers.